the highest performing people, that they are living it all the way. They feel, they own, and they care for each other, and successes, dreams, and very, very important, failures. And this is where belonging is for people, because they do it for somebody, and that somebody does it for them. And so that's when belonging is actual. It's real at that point, as opposed to a sense.
Hello and welcome to Love as a Business Strategy, a podcast that brings humanity to the workplace. We're here to talk about business, but we want to tackle topics that most business leaders tend to shy away from. We believe that humanity and love should be at the center of every successful business. As always, I am your host, Jeff Ma, and I want to have conversations and hear stories with real people about real world businesses and real world situations. And my guest today is Paul Haury, who is an executive coach that specializes in belonging. Through what he calls heart-based leading, Paul gets people to experience belonging and self-belonging in their own brilliance and within their company tribes to really live and perform better than they ever imagined. In his most recent endeavors, he served as a VP of People and Culture and as a professional coach specializing in belonging and optimal performance for individuals and companies. He's joining today to share about how people perform at their highest when they belong and believe in shared purpose together, and where people fear less and aspire more. And I love that so much. Welcome to the show, Paul. How are you?
Oh, I am fantastic, and I am so thankful to be here. This is going to be one wonderful time.
Yes, absolutely. And man, what a topic. I mean, belonging is something that's, it's in the title of our book. It's in something that we talk about all the time, but we rarely have kind of narrowed it down to just this word. And I know it's not just this word. So I'm really excited to dive into that with you. And before we begin, Paul, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with you as a person first, and kind of where does your passion lie, and what brought you to it today?
Oof, man. I mean, I could go all the way back possibly to 5 years old when because this is the way my mom tells the story, by the way. There's a birthday party. It's my birthday at the house. There's 10 kids and I'm not there. And apparently what happened, and I kind of remember this, is one friend couldn't make it for some reason, got in trouble. And so I left my birthday party because they were left out. And we were at his house using his mom's good pie plates and making mud pies out in the front yard. So I kind of had this thing about we should be having fun and really being in life. But professionally, my first systemic look at it was as in a very conscious level, was as a high school teacher. I taught at my old high school. I'm actually like a Welcome Back Kotter, if you're old enough to remember the show Welcome Back Kotter. I taught at my old high school.
Nice.
And I went to Seattle Pacific University. It was the best school to get your teaching credentials from. If you got it there, you could teach anywhere in the US and they would love you. So I had a full year of lesson plans already pre-written and ready to go. And as I started the year, and it's a tough area of the Seattle. It's White Center. It's really, it's a lower socioeconomic. It actually had the highest percentage of free and reduced lunch in the whole Northwest, which I thought was crazy, but that's what it was. It's where I grew up. But I went in and it was almost this immediate aspect. It didn't matter how detailed, how good I had preset all of the lesson plans. I mean, they covered them. They broke down the learnings. They had high active rates plus cognitive aspects and so on. But I sat there in the first day with them going, if they don't know, and that's a feel no, not just an intellectual no. If they didn't know that I loved them and that this was their place where, and I'll use the term, they belonged, then it didn't matter how good the lesson plans were. And then to the opposite was the belief that it just kind of dawned on me as I'm working with the kids, that if they know you love them, the learning will happen automatically and at very high levels, because they'll know that somebody has their back and somebody loves and cares for them. And it's not that it'll cause it, because it's not that transactional of a space, but they will respond in this space to be better and better for each other. Because I actually designed the classroom management model from a lean teaching program stuff, that they had to be caring for each other in the space. It couldn't be the teacher as the authoritarian forcing the care, because, you know, let's face it, anybody, even us, if we're told what to do, the first response is, don't tell me what to do. Daniel Pink is so right. We like our autonomy and to do our mastery and have our purpose. So in that same vein with the high school students, it was, this is your classroom. You are each other's in this classroom. And it was a total exercise, kind of like love as a business strategy was kind of like, well, let's try it. Mm-hmm. This was the same thing in the classroom. Will you guys make a place to belong for each other? And yeah, it meant the first 3 weeks was me shepherding and hounding and really re-inviting somebody into that space. And there were those that naturally gravitated to it. They wanted to make it a better place for each other. So those people became kind of like the emissaries, the shepherds of this, the sub-shepherds in the space. And then the goal wasn't to keep track of everybody in that. It was, if somebody was falling away from the space, that they were then called back in and brought back in to be part of the tribe again. And it was wonderful. I had a class of 45 students that self-managed because they took care of each other, and they aspired in a place where they could go to an edge where if they were alone, you just walk away from the edge. But because they had somebody still with them and pushing them, and they were learning NURBS, CAD/CAM software, plus Dreamweaver design software for creating websites and commerce and stuff. It was the coolest thing. But it really had everything to do with, if they know you love them, they will learn and just flourish. And so that's what I worked to create. And that's what I took even into business, about creating a space where people really belong. Yeah.
I love that. And belonging has a through line for you from 5-year-old to high school teacher to today. So I guess, can you define in the simplest way possible what belonging means now for you?
Oh, boy, you just threw me on my soapbox. No, so the most common uses and definitions of belonging are a one-way path of feeling affirmed. You can be your authentic self and all this kind of stuff. And that's a feeling of it. And that can be an affirming space. But this is where I redefine it. And I actually say, no, belonging is this. And this is where the high performance shows up. Or even the best life for somebody, where they, instead of going, I got to go to work today, because they're going to work because they belong to their family. And in that space, now you've got a divided element. Now, if they can belong at work, then you get a whole different thing. Now, instead of having to have somebody watch their back, they're all watching each other's back and they go forward. In that requires a very simple, doesn't mean it's super easy at times, but it's very simple. The highest performing people, they are living it all the way. They feel, they own, and they care for each other, and successes, dreams, and very, very important, failures. And this is where belonging is for people, because they do it for somebody, and that somebody does it for them. And so that's when belonging is actual. It's real at that point, as opposed to a sense. And
So,
so,
so can I ask you to expound on that a little bit? Because what I'm hearing is you're saying that when I feel a sense of belonging, or when there's these feelings of belonging, you're saying there's a tangible gap between that and actual belonging.
absolutely. And so for example, you could be in a place where somebody's given, Jeff's the coolest guy on earth and everything else. And, Jeff gets to express himself. And in that same space, you can have all that and even be told you have value. And look what just happened to thousands and thousands of employees. They got all that stuff. They get a sense of belonging, and they just got jettisoned. And now you find out that a sense of belonging isn't belonging. No matter, and precisely the thing is, you can have all those things and still go, I don't belong. And because this is where belonging is also a choice. Feelings is a passive space. It's almost like you're a victim to whether it is or it isn't. Belonging, though, that's why I started out with, you feel, own, and care for somebody, and not so that. So that would be the transactional. And we know when it's a transaction, we're like, yeah, what do you want? And then we know when somebody's like, I like you. I want to hang out with you. And we get that. And then it goes back and forth. And that's when belonging is actually happening. And it's just, it's a dynamic that's always happening. Mirror neurons, the chemical changes between us are happening in real time to create this actual different space. The space where it says, it's not like attachment theory. This is real. This is like, no, I'm not going to let you down. What that might mean is I might now learn something that I didn't know to make sure that I have you in a situation. And this is where the my comes into place. Feel, own, and care. You're not a Jeff Ma. You're my Jeff Ma. And so there's this whole shift that comes in the belonging that has these three aspects. And if we were to break down the psychosocial terms, it's empathy, accountability for somebody, because you're taking ownership in that space of them, and compassion, care for. I mean, empathy, if those three things, and this is why I'd limit it to just those three things, because it's kind of simply what happens for us. We feel for somebody. We take them as ours, not as a possession, but as in they're ours. And this is why we even say things like my spouse, my wife, my husband, my friend, my dog that just barked a little while ago. We don't say a dog, because we take that, and that's a part of belonging. And then we care for, because that's what we do when we belong. We unite. The outcome is we unite and fight instead of get stuck in a group fight flight. And that's a whole different model. And then this is where you get Navy SEALs and the level that they will go through to become the best at whatever they need to be for their team. Or I also like the U.S. Women's World Cup soccer team. Mm-hmm. They had all sorts of crazy in failure also in the process to winning the World Cup. And they took care of each other in that failure. And that meant that people adhered into that space of feeling, owning, and caring for each other, and how it was defined by how the core values of the team would be lived and the stories of what that would look like. And if you violated and you kept leaving that space and would put the tribe at risk, well, then you couldn't belong. And it's like everything we say. And like there's a point in your guys' book where the walls out, we have the inside the walls of Softway. Well, that's because the belonging of Softway was also a boundary. It's a place to invite into a place of incredible love and space, but it's the Softway way to belong. And so to go back to it, to make it simple, belonging is feeling, owning, and caring for somebody in successes, dreams, and failures. And they do the same for you. And what ends up happening is in a company tribe, getting high performance, is your belonging and then believing in shared purpose together. And you're figuring out ways to do it and get it done, as opposed to being caught in a set of systems and processes that prescribe ways for you to be. And because this is where innovation comes from, resilience for, just let go of the rope and let me go. And it's like, nope, I'm hanging on. You're getting a rope burn, but you won't let go of the person. And that's the space when you can craft that and set the environment that brings that about. I mean, it's like the coolest feeling on earth. And you go home and you're a better husband, a better father, a better wife, spouse, lover. Everything comes into that play.
Well, you're speaking my language. I'm fully bought in. 100% agree. I'm going to play the devil's advocate for the sake of the conversation. When you look at the average workplace, let's just say the corporate workplace today, what you just described is, in my opinion, from my experience, not seen very often, at least not in large scales, maybe in smaller individual relationships, or maybe smaller teams, or maybe startups, entrepreneur situations. But once we get into this typical corporate workspace, people have a larger gap to get to what you just described, because what I heard from you was there's a lot of investing in each other that has to happen in terms of emotionally, mentally, and even physically investing time and energy into our relationships. Would you agree with that initial assessment?
That would be an understatement.
Okay. So
oh yeah.
From there, my question is, how do we get there? I know it's a journey, as we all align around while we're even having this conversation. There's a journey to be had. There's awareness and there's commitment to move down that path. But through heart-based leading and the things that you talk about, what is, you don't have to lay out the entire journey, but what are the steps? What's the tangible hurdles to overcome to get to a place where that's possible?
The hardest part of it is there's a whole economic system that's rewarding not love and belonging. And so it requires somebody to have a shift in their own internal story. And that person has to have, what's the word I want? They need to have the ability to be in power and influence to make that change in the face of the risk. Because it is a risk. I mean, when you look at a CEO that might have the same awakening that Muhammad had, and they want to do something, but there's a board that's providing the funding for their company that says, I want these results, I want them by now because this is my exit place and you're going to pay me. And the CEO has a choice, and it's a lose-lose choice. It's, I do this and I do what my conscience and my heart is really telling me to do, which is to make a loving place where I have the most elite team of players who have each other's back. And that requires me to have a 7-year roadmap instead of a 5. And if he sticks with it, they yank their funding. If he sticks with it, they might yank her as a CEO. Nope, you're out of here. Because that's the stuff that happens in the system. So it really requires somebody to really have the guts to stand in the face of that. And the system has been like this for at least 100 years. I mean, it's Taylorist, it's science. It's where this is an unfortunate place where science actually kind of screwed things up. The science of creating an efficient business model that removed humanity instead of the science that could have built into the brilliance of humans in high-level performance. into the model. It was actually the opposite. It was how do we get to mediocre but predictable performance. And there was a devil in the details there, which meant we lost being human.
Well, it was crafted in a day and age
when we
when we were working assembly lines and people didn't have to do more than one thing at a time. So the more efficient, the better. And today, the problems we face require creativity and collaboration, and we're still using the same.
Absolutely. But the old model, the overlay is there.
Yeah.
So, but where, and I think this is where, like, even the software story is so important. We don't change our minds because of facts and details. If that was the case, we would have already a much more diverse world. We would have way more women on boards and in senior leadership teams, flat out. Just, I mean, the numbers don't lie, but the arguments don't change people. They never have. What does change people is when they hear story and the story gets shared to them and the story lands in space, and then they go from a belief to a misbelief, meaning now they're like, oh, I could do this different. Once that comes to play, it's like, but how will they do this different and still survive? Wait a minute, they did it? Holy crap. I need to talk to them. I need to read, I need to listen. And then it moves into a new belief. And then we get a chance to decide how we would live, and those behaviors would reveal that new belief and accomplish it. And so I think it's going to be a long road to get this change, and you can't force it. It's to be just like, hey, you need to go do this the right way. And the person says, if I don't have my job, I can't feed my family. You're not telling somebody to do something better and new or whatever. You're telling somebody to potentially let their family die. And so that's where we keep making a mistake by saying, you should do it this way, you're wrong, and everything else. When it's like, no, it'd be more get into it and reveal it. And yeah, you are absolutely correct. The system is stacked against it at this point but though we do have these examples. Software is an example. Barry Waymiller, the Everybody Matters story. Digital tutors with Piyush Patel. Is that right? Yeah. It was, it's now, I can't remember the name of the company who bought them, but he had the same aspect. Rich Sheridan with Menlo Innovations.
Yep.
We do have examples. And I think this is the case where sharing those examples, like I've already passed your guys' book along to, I don't know how many people right now, because it's a story they need to have, because this is what will change the game. And it won't, the world won't just flip on a dime. I don't think there's too much power there, but if we keep sharing the story, that's where we get the change. And then this is how we literally evangelize love as a business strategy. And my thoughts would be, this is how we become heart-based.
Well, I'm sold, but at the same time,
I'm preaching to the choir.
Yeah, keeping on track with the devil's advocate storyline here. It sounds like people not only have to have courage, like you mentioned, to do something outside of their comfort zone and put things at risk, but there's also an element of caring beyond the bottom line. And for many people, that's a different story, right? Some people, it's, look, I have a family to feed, so no matter what, I can't risk or sacrifice my position, my put to risk my progress in climbing this ladder. And for other people, it's a matter of, that privilege that, I'm not in a position to shake things up or do something different. There's just so many different storylines that get played out. There's always a reason. And we call it, at Love as a Business Strategy, we call it, people need a case for change. People need to find their own reason. It can't be, oh, I want to be promoted. I want to be just business successful. It has to be some reason beyond yourself, beyond your immediate kind of capitalistic needs, something that makes you want to be a better leader, something that makes you want to make a difference, something that makes you want to care and put yourself out there and put your vulnerabilities kind of at stake You have to find that. In your experience for heart-based leading, what does that journey look like? How do you help folks? What do you call that? How do you get them to that point, and how do you help them find it?
So it's that point right there. And this is how I really realized it was about belonging. So if we really look at the human experience, there's 3 emotions that are always in play. And that is, we're always in fear, we're always in or out of belonging, and we're always in aspiration. I had a CEO once go, yeah, they're just sitting around daydreaming. I says, no, they're not daydreaming. They're aspiring. They wish they were someplace else that they would really love being at. And the look I got was, that really irritated look. And I says, no, it's literally, that's what it is. And like, even in good, really phenomenal belonging, we move from our fear moves from a fear of to a fear for. And I'll get to where this change actually happens. And especially even at a senior, at the CEO level, we could go with. Like, I would welcome talking to a board about this, so that a board could get these stories and get the understanding, so that the board would then react differently to a CEO. I'm fine with that. That's a perfect use of time. So, but it's in belonging, we make this different move. We go from, like, if we were on some elite team and we were practicing, the most important thing for us to actually be in the highest position for performance would be to make sure that I loved you and you loved me, and we were not going to, because that meant I was taking care of your family and you were taking care of my family at the same time. Now we're shifting what would keep us from a non-belonging space to be in one where we will then unite and fight for that, because it's a fear for. And so if I'm working with a CEO, like one recently even, it was to, what do you want? What would actually work for you in the space to be able to show up, to invite that person to be at that better place, as opposed to being in a space of discontent and judgment? Because you can still have the super high standard of that, what you need for the tribe to keep going and to advance and grow. But you have to invite somebody in. And if they choose not to, they're probably choosing not to belong, because every company has, like, software walls. Every company has a boundary. So if you invite people into that space, but they have to come to it from their own story. And this is, I think, where the conversion place and belonging happens, because that's also a place of self-belonging, where you're going to care for yourself as a CEO, just as you would for some of your senior leaders, and then also then your mid-tiers, that ultimately they also then in that care will scale it out, this was my classroom model, by the way, to scale then to the people that touch all the people that are the extended tribe of your company, which would be your clients. So in that story, once somebody in the leadership space, the influence space, because you don't have to be, and this is why I love they call it a crap umbrella? Was that the term?
That's a different word, but yes.
A different word? Okay.
Yes, it's a different word, but yes, it's an umbrella that has poop
that shield
raining down on it.
Yeah. You can do that space also. And that becomes a place where everybody lands in that we are an elite team for each other first to go forward. And once somebody can find that story in their space, then they can reach back and scale in that level of vulnerability. And so that's the process of getting somebody into that space, is to go and work in that story, in their belonging, and then find so that they can expand that belonging. It's part of what I loved about the story, and even how you all were intertwined in that same kind of experience of discovering how you guys would create your particular style of love as a business strategy.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that shift in the fear, because fear is pervasive in everything we talk about as well.
And we don't get to avoid it. We're designed not to fall off cliffs.
Yeah.
But we're also designed to get as close to that cliff as possible so we can see the view. And we do that with somebody, because it's like, I'm going to go to the edge. Oh, no, you're not. Those are bad rocks. Okay, just let me go closer, and would you just make sure if I'm going to slip, that you got me? Oh, you're stupid, but okay. And we want to do that stuff. I'm a rock climber, so it's kind of part of the
Perfect analogy.
But yeah, it's that move. And so we're always if you design and set your company ways to belong. So there's the ways to belong and the ways to get, I'll say, crap done. I'll turn it down a little bit. That's your culture. And the ways to belong are the codified space of, to be Softway. This is us. We are Softway. This is the coat of arms we wear, and everything else. Those ways become embraced and heralded, and we know that, oh, you just said that language? Are you a Softway person? And it's, yeah, I am. And then you share that. Well, that's the same. People will get that, but every CEO, for example, has to start in that space and not be shitting on themselves. If they can discover and go into that space, then they can share themselves in that space, and then they can create that culture. And maybe they can even do that in a way that if they style it with the economic requirements for ROI for whatever funding they might be getting, or they might even choose a different funding source. No, we don't like your funding. We're going to go to this one. We hear that this group out of San Francisco has a very high people value. So we're going to go talk to them and spend the next 12 months building a relationship with them to see if we're a good group, if we can belong and form a great company together. So there's a way.
This is a challenging, I guess, topic to help leaders really understand and grasp and definitely apply, especially in this day and age. But I love the way you've positioned it. I love heart-based leading and how that really puts some shape around what that needs to look like, and it gives a different perspective of how to approach it. So it's eye-opening for me, and I appreciate the time you've taken today to come share that with us.
I'm just excited to even have a space like this to share this kind of stuff, because I've had my fair share of, you don't know what you're talking about, you don't know what you're thinking. Matter of fact, I even had a couple situations like, you need to think less like a woman, and oh yeah, it's that kind of stuff. Because look what we're talking about. We're talking about belonging, just like what it was like to start talking about love as a business strategy. You end up with the same concept. Oh, belonging is just the feely stuff. No, belonging is the space where you have the highest performing teams on earth, groups of people on earth. And that's how we're designed. Just because the business world took a left turn and missed on the, oh yeah, this is what it means to be human thing, didn't make that turn, even if everybody went that way for a time, the right turn.
I always look people right in the eye and tell them these are not soft skills. These are critical skills.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, okay. You get a little eye roll and you're like, oh, you'll see.
Yeah. So, okay. This is funny that you said it. So this was a few years ago. Let's see, I don't need this feely stuff. And so I'm sitting there. And so I start looking away as he's talking, and he goes, aren't we in this meeting together? And I went, oh, so my paying attention and being present with you did matter? And he was just like,
I'm going to use that. I love it.
Oh, it was funny. And it was like, and then what was interesting is later on we were talking, he goes, people have been walking into my office, and he goes, I've been an a-hole because I won't look up from my email. And like I said, this is the space where somebody, like if I told you this is what you should do, you'd be like, no, I'll figure it out for myself. Get away from me, jerk. If I'm sharing in story, because our mind is always in story and retelling of story. But if I share a story and if I give an experience, then all of a sudden, now we just landed in misbelief. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, please.
Okay. I want to know, when you went from this is how we've been doing things to, oh, this is not how we should be doing things. I want to try it this way. That you went into that misbelief to new belief. When was yours?
Those are all different milestones, sir. I
Oh,
think,
really?
I think there's an element of from the book's timeline, from the beginning of that story, there's an inside part of me that already knew that this is not
Mm,
how we want to do things. So there's already a misbelief in what's going on. Now, I think the challenge many people have, and I did too, was how to connect that to what to believe in instead and
mm-hmm.
what to try. And those are two separate steps as well, because there's a different time in that timeline where I was like, you know what? I want to believe in this. There's a level of commitment that just it comes after awareness and then understanding and then commitment. And those are separate steps that take their own time as well, where I'm like, you know what? I finally understand what it is that I want to make a difference through. And that commitment's an extra step where I'm like, well, am I ready to make a change? Am I ready to do that? And then the last part of your question is like, when did you decide to try? And that's a separate time because literally I had to then decide, these are the actual steps I want to take. And it's not on a calendar anywhere, but in my mind, this is this growth path that we try to help others through as well, because everyone's path will look different.
Right.
Some people talk to us and go home and turn their lives upside down because they're like, the light bulb's on and it just clicks and it makes sense.
And it
Other
can't
people,
get turned. And this is that point of a misbelief. It can't get turned off now.
oh, well, we know that's not true. Uh, but other people will sit on this for 2 years and come back and say, you know what? It finally clicked when somebody said
Yeah.
this to me. It finally makes sense when I look back and I look at the trail of dead bodies behind me and I'm just like, oh, that's what happened. And so
Yeah.
and that's why I called it a case for change earlier, because it's different for everybody. It's a personal case for change.
Mm-hmm. Like,
What
and okay, so that's right there. That's God. That's the answer for how change happens, even if we're looking at inside the system. Somebody goes through and has all that same level of, oh, I know it and I know it, but I'm almost there. And they just, my experience is they need somebody, and back to tie it to belonging, to go with.
Mhm.
And this, I like the haunted house model. Um, I mean, I might have mentioned it before in our
No,
earlier.
I'm just already connecting the dots. I
I
know.
mean, you don't go into a haunted house alone, but you will go with a best friend,
Mhm.
and it'll scare the crap out of you, and you will laugh your butt off. Would you go alone? No, but you'll you'll go with a friend,
Yeah.
and that's it's that same thing. So maybe we actually just need to create a much more open invitation for people to belong, which is hard because we all have to belong, but we don't all belong with everybody.
Mm.
But we do have to belong because that's how we're wired.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the way we approach that is we strive to make tangible efforts in the environment that we create, knowing that not everyone can always belong in every context,
Mm.
but setting the standard that at least sets the expectations that we will strive to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Because while you cannot, in my opinion, create a perfectly belonging organization, especially as you scale, you're always going to have difference. You're always going to have humans in the mix, which will create conflict, will create feelings and assumptions and other things. It's very human. But to us, the goal isn't, oh, look at this utopia of belonging where everyone is just always warm and fuzzy. But on the contrary, it's a place where I can come and say, hey, hello, I don't feel like I belong.
Right.
And can somebody help me? And we'll say, oh, that wasn't our intent, but let's talk about it. Let's figure it out because we value that together.
And that's a brilliant point with this. There's boy, I hate even saying this. The belonging isn't permanent. Like, I'm not going to cry. I lost my dad last year at the end of the year. We're all belonging because it's human, is temporary. We're temporary here. We're going to go somewhere else. I mean, I've died before, so I've been in a different place, which is crazy. But I've been away from the space, where I was away from everybody I loved. And I was in a great place, don't get me wrong. I was joyous, cheerful, laughing. I've got a little write-up in one of the stories. But I knew I wasn't going to be with Eliza. Eliza's my better half. And I was like, she's not here. And we can have a workplace where we spend 8 to 10 hours a day where we're not with people we love.
Mhm.
That's like a living death. You're slowly just dead for 2,000, if we just do the minimum, 2,080 hours in a full-time job a year. And it doesn't have to be that way. But to be in the place where you belong means you're going to share what the values, the core values that matter most together. You won't be identical. You'll have other values, but you just can't you can't have a core value that's against those values for that to actually work.
Yep.
And then there's also the belief. You got to say, I love what we're doing here. We're changing the world. I'm doing the smallest thing. This is my role. But I know that person's life is better. And I mean, I had one of my favorite stories from Fulcrum. How much time do we have left?
Negative 10 minutes.
Oh, negative 10.
But it's okay. There's no rules.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay. So my former company, we made, just because I'm boring as hell, automated asset lifecycle management through mobile devices over the cellular infrastructure.
Wow. It's a mouthful.
A really advanced, very simplistic way to do it and make it work and then like Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, they were all the clients, and now Airtel India. So, but we made this product, and I was up when we were talking. We do show and tells for the whole company so that people would know each other's lives as well as what they were working on across the company, so they knew they were all contributing to making the same company keep going. And that's a beautiful way to do this. And the whole company stops for 15 to 20 minutes, sometimes a half hour, and we just show and tell and celebrate. And I remember sitting there and I was listening to the developers talk and everything. And I said, so I'm going to ask you guys this. I was just in Home Depot and I watched a guy use one of the devices that we use, and they were able to keep track of everything that was in that store inventory and find it for people instead of getting frustrated and hating their life. I said, I want to ask you to think about, you're not making a software product. You're making somebody's life better. You're saving people's marriages and permanent relationships and so on. I says, this guy when I said, can you help me find this? He says, oh yeah. Oh, I got this new thing on my phone. I can take you right to where it is. And the joy on his face was a state of relief from software development of what he had before that didn't work at all. And so I asked my development group in that company, can you think this way? You are saving marriages and lives, because everybody gets happier, everybody prospers better, and so on if you're going that direction. So, and I'm like, please just let this stick somewhere. And I found out later that one of the top developer architects went to the support space and the CFO and said, who can I talk to find out where I can get these stories from people so I can really know how our software is changing people's lives? And it was like, yes, that's it right there. That's the space where people are extending their belonging internally, mm-hmm. as the Fulcrum tribe, to now having the belonging include not just the CEO or making the decision to use our software, but the person of the software sits in the hands in the middle of somewhere in the United States at a cell tower and is able to actually do the job without the frustration and make their life easier, because they're going to go home. They're going to be a better father, mother, son, daughter, whatever language you'd like to use in that space, that's what'll happen. And it was just one of those things where I was just like, it was so cool. And he went through the effort to go and find and seek it out. He didn't have to be told that. It wasn't that. And that's the belonging space.
Yeah.
That we choose for each other. And that's why I put it, it's more of a give get than a get give. The do you feel it, then we get higher engagement. That's a get give. Belonging is give get. And the neurobiology is really cool about that, but I won't go into that space right now. But that's the place where we know that, because we're in, like, if something goes wrong and if I drop the ball or you drop the ball and we're in a pursuit of something, we don't go blah, blah, blah. We're like, oh man, you dropped the ball. What do we need to have this not happen again? Or dang, it's okay. Get back up. We're going to get through this. And we proactively hit things in a space that we would normally be reactive in the current standard model of business.
Mm-hmm. And everything you described is really a great perspective and a summation of why both of us really do what we do. We call it bringing humanity back to the workplace, but for the very reasons that you just described, because it affects lives. It affects how we show up in our lives, how much we enjoy these thousands of hours we pour into work is such a big part of our life. Well, what are we working for if not for our own happiness, our own health, our own families, and things like that? So
right.
You summed up a great perspective, another way to look at that, and how belonging is at the helm of really purpose and a purpose-driven kind of resilience in our work. And I love it. I really, and I have a lot more questions actually. So maybe we'll get you back on the show to keep diving into this. But for now, I just want to thank you for the time you've spent, and the conversation we had today is amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. What a joy, man. Thanks.
Yeah. And I hope the listeners enjoyed this as well. Thank you to listeners who have tuned in this week. We have a new episode out every week for you with a new guest. And if you haven't checked out the book already, please do. Love is a Business Strategy. Don't forget to leave a review for the book, for the podcast, subscribe, rate, tell a friend, all that good stuff, because we enjoy I enjoy doing this. I hope everybody enjoys what they get out of this as well, especially from Paul today, who's just given just some wisdom bombs for all of us. So thank you so much, Paul, once again. And thanks to the listeners. We'll see everybody next week.